June 8th, 793. At a date that would echo through history as the beginning of the Viking Age. On a small island off the English coast, the monks of Lindisfarne were about to face an enemy unlike anything they had ever imagined. This is the true story of the first great Viking raid. A story of faith, violence, and an unexpected encounter that would change two civilizations forever. Welcome back to the channel, and let's dive into history. The morning began like any other on Lindisfarne. The sun rose over the calm North Sea, casting golden light across the ancient monastery. The island was a sanctuary of learning and faith, one of the most important religious centers in all of England. Inside the stone walls, monks in simple brown robes walked quietly through the cloisters. Their day began before dawn with prayers, followed by hours of careful, meticulous work. In the scriptorium, Brother Aiden, a young monk in his 20s, sat hunched over a manuscript. His hand moved with practiced precision as he applied delicate gold leaf to the pages of a sacred text. This wasn't just any monastery. Lindisfarne housed some of Christianity's greatest treasures: golden crosses studded with precious jewels, silver chalices that caught the candlelight, and most precious of all, illuminated manuscripts that had taken decades to create, their pages adorned with breathtaking Celtic designs. But here's the thing. These monks had no defenses, no walls, no weapons, no soldiers. They didn't need them, or so they thought. Their isolation was their protection. Their faith was their shield. That morning, as Brother Aiden worked, he had no idea that everything was about to change. Brother Aiden stood and walked to the window to rest his eyes. That's when he saw them. At first, they were just dark shapes on the horizon. He squinted, thinking they might be fishing boats. But as they drew closer, his blood turned to ice. These were unlike any ships he'd ever seen. Long and sleek, cutting through the water with terrifying speed. And at the prow of each vessel, carved dragon heads, their mouths open as if ready to devour the world. Vikings, Aiden whispered. He'd never seen a Viking before. None of them had. But everyone had heard the stories, whispered tales of savage warriors from the frozen north, men who worshipped strange gods of thunder and war, men who showed no mercy. Aiden's hands shook as he rang the chapel bell, frantically trying to warn the others, but it was already too late. The longships hit the beach with a grinding crash, and from those ships poured warriors that seemed more legend than reality. Tall, powerful men with wild beards and long hair, their bodies wrapped in leather and fur, round shields painted with fierce symbols. And axes, battle axes that gleamed like silver teeth in the morning sun. At their head stood a massive warrior, Ragnar Bluetooth, though the monks wouldn't learn his name until later. He raised his axe to the sky and let out a war cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of the monastery. Raid had begun. What happened next was swift and brutal. The Vikings crashed through the monastery, gates like a tidal wave of destruction. The monks, who had spent their entire lives in peaceful prayer and study, stood frozen in absolute terror. Some fell to their knees, praying desperately for divine intervention. Others tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. They were trapped on an island. The Vikings moved with the precision of experienced raiders. They knew exactly what they were looking for. They smashed open the treasury doors, and their eyes went wide. Gold crosses, jeweled reliquaries, silver candlesticks that would fetch a fortune in any market. Thor has blessed us, one warrior shouted in Old Norse, stuffing precious items into leather sacks. But they didn't just take the obvious treasures. They grabbed illuminated manuscripts, ripping them from their shelves. Most of Vikings couldn't read, but they could recognize value: the gold and silver thread woven into the bindings, the precious jewels embedded in the covers. The elderly abbot, Father Cuthbert, stepped forward with his arms outstretched. He was trying to be brave, trying to appeal to their humanity. In God's name, he cried out, "We are men of peace. We have done you no harm." A Viking axe was the only answer he received. What followed was a massacre. Monks were cut down where they stood. Some were clubbed unconscious. They would wake up in chains, destined to be sold as slaves in distant markets. The screams, the smoke, the blood. It all happened so fast. This holy place, this sanctuary of learning and faith, had become a slaughterhouse. In the chaos, Brother Aiden managed to slip away, his heart pounding, his breath coming in gasps. He ran toward the one place he thought he could make a difference. The library. This was the monastery's most sacred space. Shelves upon shelves of manuscripts, some centuries old, the collected wisdom of generations. Aiden's hands trembled as he grabbed the monastery's greatest treasure, the Lindisfarne Gospels. This wasn't just a book, it was a masterpiece, an illuminated Bible that had taken years to create. Its pages were adorned with intricate Celtic knotwork, images of angels and evangelists, all rendered in brilliant blues, reds, and golds. He heard footsteps, heavy boots on stone. Vikings were coming. Aiden pressed himself into the shadows between two tall bookshelves, clutching the Gospels to his chest. Through a gap, he watched as a massive warrior entered the library. The Viking stopped and looked around. And here's something interesting. There was almost a sense of wonder on his face. His rough, calloused hand reached out, trailing along the leather spines of the books, as if he'd never seen anything like this before. "What is this place?" the Viking muttered in Norse. Then his eyes found Aiden's hiding spot. Their gazes locked. The young monk clutched the Gospels tighter, prepared to die, protecting them. But the Viking didn't attack. Instead, he called out, "Ragnar, come si ise." The Viking leader entered the library, and when he saw the terrified monk holding that magnificent book, he raised his hand to signal for his warrior to stop. Ragnar approached slowly. He was covered in blood, whether his own or others. It was impossible to tell. His axe dripped red on the library floor. "Give it to me," he said in broken Latin. It was one of the few phrases he knew. Brother Aiden didn't move. Cold, his whole body had frozen with fear. Ragnar's expression hardened. "Give it," he repeated, "or die." What choice did Aiden have? With trembling hands, he surrendered the Lindisfarne Gospels. But here's where something unexpected happened. Ragnar took the heavy book, and he took it carefully, almost reverently. He opened it, and even though he couldn't read a word of Latin, even this battle-hardened raider was struck by what he saw. The illuminations were breathtaking. Angels with golden halos, the four evangelists surrounded by swirling Celtic patterns, colors that seemed to glow and the firelight streaming through the windows. "What is this?" Ragnar asked, his voice quieter now. "The word of God," Aiden replied, finding his voice. "It tells of love, of forgiveness, of sacrifice." Ragnar looked at the young monk. Then he looked around at the devastation, the burning buildings visible through the windows, the bodies of monks lying in the courtyard, his warriors hauling sacks of treasure toward their ships. For just a moment, something flickered across Ragnar's scarred, weathered face. Was it that regret? Sham? It was impossible to say. The moment passed as quickly as it came. He tucked the Gospels under his arm like a prize of war. "Your God did not protect you today, Christian," he said. Brother Aiden, finding courage from somewhere deep within, looked the Viking leader in the eye and replied, "Perhaps he did. You're letting me live." As the sun began to set, painting the sky the color of blood, the Vikings finished their work. They had taken everything of value: gold, silver, precious stones, fine cloth, and people. Several monks, bound in chains, were dragged to the ships. They would be sold as slaves in markets as far away as Constantinople. Brother Aiden, wounded but alive, stood among the ruins and watched the long ships push off from shore. He could see Ragnar standing in the lead vessel, the Lindisfarne Gospels still in his possession. The raid had lasted only a few hours, but those few hours changed everything. News of the attack spread like wildfire across England and throughout Christian Europe. People were horrified, terrified. If the Vikings could strike even the holiest of places, if they could violate even this sanctuary, Then nowhere was safe. The survivors, those who hadn't been killed or taken, began the grim work of burying the dead and tending the wounded. 35 monks had been slaughtered. The monastery lay in smoking ruins. But Brother Aidan noticed something. In their haste, the Vikings had scattered many manuscripts, but left them behind too heavy or not valuable enough to carry. Over the coming weeks, he and the other survivors would carefully collect and preserve what remained of their precious library. The monastery would be rebuilt, but it would never be the same. From that day forward, monks kept watch on the horizon. They built defenses that would have been unthinkable before. The Age of Innocence was over. The Viking Age had begun, but this story doesn't end with destruction, because history is never that simple. Months later, in a longhouse in Denmark, Ragnar sat by the fire. The Lindisfarne Gospels lay open before him. His young son, Eric, only 7 years old, peered over his father's shoulder. "What is it, father?" the boy asked. "A book," Ragnar replied, "from the Christian god's house across the sea." Eric's small finger traced over the golden illuminations, following the curves of the Celtic. "It's beautiful. Can you read it?" Ragnar shook his head. "No, but look at the work that went into this, my son. Te patience, te skill, the dedication. These monks may not be warriors, but they are masters of something we are not." He thought back to that moment in the library, to Brother Aidan's words. Perhaps he did. "You're letting me live." Ragnar had raided many places in his life. He had killed many men. But something about that young monk's fearless faith had stayed with him, like a splinter he couldn't remove. "Will you teach me to read, father?" Eric asked. Agnar carefully closed the book. "Perhaps one day you will learn," he said. "The world is changing, my son. We, Vikings, are strong. Our axes are sharp, and our ships are swift. But there are other kinds of strength in this world. And here's what's fascinating. Ragnar never destroyed those gospels. He never melted them down for gold. They became something of a talisman to him, a connection to something he didn't fully understand but somehow respected. When Ragnar died, Eric inherited the book, and Eric, influenced by that manuscript and by the Christian traders and settlers he encountered, eventually converted to Christianity. He learned to read, and those gospels, stolen in blood and violence, became a bridge between two worlds. The raid on Lindisfarne was just the beginning. For the next 3 centuries, Viking longships would terrorize the coasts of Europe. But those same Vikings would also settle, trade, intermarry, and eventually, many would convert to Christianity. Brother Aidan lived to old age, eventually becoming abbot of the rebuilt monastery. He never forgot that terrible day, but he also never forgot Ragnar's moment of hesitation, that brief flicker of something almost like respect. The Viking Age was an era of violence, yes, but also of transformation, of cultures colliding and reshaping each other, of blood and faith, swords and books, warriors and monks. 2 worlds that seemed destined only to destroy each other instead changed each other forever. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, smash that like button and subscribe for more historical stories. And let me know in the comments, what historical event should I cover next? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.